Again, thanks to the India Bioscience team for having me here. I was just telling Shashi, it seems a bit funny that I'm a mentor here. I still remember my first YIM in Srinagar, and it was an amazing experience. IIMs are an amazing experience, and my first recommendation to all the young people here is please make the full use of the time that you have here, because it's years down the line you're going to understand how great a meeting this is. So yeah, I'm happy to be here, and I will give you a brief overview of my journey of the last 2 decades, I guess. Where does this work? The computer is there, and this is not working. Okay, so I will begin from my very first step in academia, which was, I think, my PhD, and this was at IISER, where I joined in 2001, and I did my PhD with Professor Anindita, whom I consider to be the best possible mentor in the world because of many reasons, which can be a talk in itself. But what did I do when I was there? I worked on, as I like to say, WASP politics, studying this very fascinating paper wasp called Rhopaluria marginata, and it took me a little longer than the stipulated time for doing my PhD, and then I continued to work there as a postdoc for some time because we wanted to complete an ongoing project. What I learned there was much more than just my science. I learned how to teach. I trained dozens and dozens of summer interns every summer, and I think I learned how to do research and how to train others through this process. I got a lot of exposure to fields outside of science because Professor Bhadra started this fascinating center called the Center for Contemporary Studies, where I met people from across the world and multiple disciplines, which gave me a worldview which was beyond just science. I picked up better writing and speaking skills, and I picked up leadership roles because I was involved in the Students' Council, I was involved in the Students' Magazine and all kinds of things, and I got involved in all kinds of activities, including theater. So that was the lab life or the department life which I was leading, but I also had another life in IISER, which began, I think the biggest thing that I picked up from Professor Gadadkar was how to be a scientist and how to be a mentor. So the other journey which I was also going through at this point of time was I met my current husband, Arun, doing theater in IISER, got married when I was in the beginning of my 3rd year, had our son in 2006 when I was still doing my PhD, and I submitted my thesis very proudly on his first birthday. And that was the journey which actually taught me a lot of life skills. And again, this journey was possible of at least submitting my thesis when I did because I had a very supportive mentor. And then I took the big leap. I decided I don't want to go abroad for a postdoc because I have a family and we don't want to split up the family. And again, after many discussions, Professor Gadadkar suggested, why don't you apply to the IISERs, which had just started the year my son was born, and I did. And from wasps, I moved to dogs. People often ask me why, and here are some of the answers or questions that provoked me to think about what I want to work on. I wanted to be different. I told Professor Gadadkar that I don't want to be identified as your student doing your kind of science in India all my life. And I must say why I consider him to be the best possible mentor. Many mentors across the world would hate that student forever if they say this. Mine stood up, shook hands with me and said, you've made me really proud, you've given academic fitness. That is what a good mentor is like. I wanted an easy to access model system because I did not want to go for field work in remote locations to get my data when I had a small baby at home. And I also was applying to a teaching institute, so I did not want to miss out on my teaching. I was interested in social behavior because social behavior is what I was working on when I worked on WASPs. And I wanted to look at a system where social behavior was part of the questions I would be addressing. And of course, it has to be something where there were a lot of open questions. So So, why dogs? A lot of research was going on in dogs already. In the global north, people were studying pet dogs, brought into the laboratories and answering a lot of interesting questions. And often when I read these papers, I wondered, why don't they ever look at dog populations which are out there in the open? There were evolutionary questions, the big question of how did dogs become dogs, and everybody was trying to answer them by looking at pets and comparing them with captive wolves, and I thought it does not make sense when you can look at populations of dogs which are in a natural environment of their own. And the natural environment and the population was right there outside our doorsteps. Nobody had studied them, so what better thing to go to but to the free-ranging dogs for my research. Just to give you an understanding, 70 to 80% of the world's dog population are actually the strays or the free-ranging dogs and not the pets, though everybody thinks dogs belong to people's homes, and they are spread out all over the global south and also some countries in the global north. So I joined IISER as in a position which no longer exists. They were called IISER Fellows. They were contractual positions for 3 years, and I started in 2009 June, where I joined when the campus was still not built. So we were in what we called our transit campus. And of course, once you suddenly step from one side of the table to other, you start getting new responsibilities. It was a new institute, so all of us were fumbling to find our ways through, most of us very young, of same age group. We were building, preparing syllabi, we were developing lab modules, we were buying equipment, we were furnishing the teaching labs. Everything was being done by a bunch of people who didn't know where to go. And we had a few people like Shashi who were there visiting us from time to time and helping us. We had fantastic students. The first few batches of IISER students were the most brilliant, and it was amazing to interact with them both inside and outside the classroom. And of course, I realized that at that point of time, I was actually juggling many hats. I was a mother of a 2.5-year-old, I was a teacher, I was a clerk and administrator from time to time because you had to do so much paperwork which I had never done during my PhD. That's one thing I never learned during my PhD. And of course, then you were setting up a research lab, mentoring students, so it was a crazy time, but it was also very interesting times. So I'll just tell you in brief what worked at that point of time. So first thing I feel that worked is that I had a plan. Before applying, I had written up a research proposal, put it through RG, he had given comments, so I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I would start, which was like the detailed research proposal. In fact, I had started working on dogs, going out on the IISc campus, looking at them and framing my questions. All of this I began before I went to IISER Bhopal. I love teaching. I have wanted to be a teacher ever since I was 5 years old, and I had my dream job where I could teach. Nothing could be better than that. And then my training to train, which I picked up during my PhD years, was very, very helpful when I was in the classroom or when I was handling students in the lab courses. That became very handy. My two first students, Sriyuni and Manavi, joined within a very short span of time in 2010, and we got started collecting data, doing a lot of things which were very preliminary stuff, but nobody had done them. So we were trying to answer questions relating to population densities of dogs, their distribution, basic behavior, building a behavior chart called an ethogram, all of this. And the first big question we pondered into was understanding maternal care. All of this we began by 2010, and we also got the first grant in April 2010, which was actually based on that proposal I had written sitting in IISc when I knew I would be coming to IISER Bhopal. So life seemed very nice until a big blow came. So September 2011, I was handed a termination letter, and this was a big story which I'm not going into. And it took almost 5 years to finally get me into a position of assistant professor, which was a regular tenure. So I have actually written about this experience in detail for India Bioscience as it happens, If anyone's interested, it's right there outside in the first Joey book. So if you want to go read about it, I'm not going to talk about that. But what happened in between since September 2011 to 2016, in my life, I faced multiple interviews for the position, which was there anyway. Eventually, I was given a position of assistant professor on contract. My first publication from the lab had already come by 2013. I was getting very good teaching feedback. I was handling multiple responsibilities for the institute. In between, I got the SCRB Women Excellence Grant, I got the Fast Track Grant. Both in 2013, I became an IIB Young Scientist. All of this did not ensure me a regular position at IISER Kolkata. Meanwhile, in 2015, I became the founding chair of the International Young Academy of Science, something I'll mention again briefly later. And in 2016, I was a member of the Global Young Academy, but still then, I was on a contractual position. And in between all of this, my daughter was born in 2011. So that has been kind of the overview of the journey. I'll give you a very small overview of the kind of work we do, and I'm happy to take detailed questions about them from anyone who's interested in what we do. So what do we do at the Dog Lab? Of course, we study dogs. We look at how dogs interact with each other, where we look at behaviors in the broad theme of parental care, mating, interactions between siblings, territorial interactions, competition between groups over food space and mates. We look at interactions between dogs and humans, where we look at humans as resources and humans as threats. And the other category of questions that we pursue is to understand how smart dogs are, where we usually put them through experiments in the field, and these could be questions pertaining to their task-solving abilities, their ability to understand and distinguish between quantities, and more recently, a lot of experiments on their food preference and color preference. Why are we doing all of this? One very important thing that we are interested in is how well they understand humans and adjust to humans in the natural ecosystem of streets, and put it all together to build the big picture of how dogs became man's best friend. So, I think we all understand that we share a very special relationship with dogs, and it is a very old relationship. The first image out here, you don't think the pointer is working? Okay, so the first image out there is actually a dog toy from the Indus Valley. And then you have dogs in graves, dogs in wall painting, cave walls, dogs in paintings. So, of course, this relationship worldwide has been very old. And in India, we have a very special story about dogs. I think everyone in this room recognizes what that image is. Going to heaven, right? Followed by Dharma in the shape of a dog. Why I always talk about this image is because that dog is a typical street dog whose behavior hasn't really changed over the last 2,000 years. In fact, this is a news clipping from a few years back about a stray dog which followed an expedition party to a peak in the Himalayas from a village in Nepal, just like that, and ended up befriending these people. And this is what makes these dogs so interesting. Behaviorally, they have been the same in the same ecosystem for centuries, undergoing some changes and adaptations they must have when we went from a rural to an urban habitat around us. So, of course, if we look at dogs around us, they have a love-hate relationship with humans. Some people love them a lot to take them to vets, give them food, give them shelter, pet them all the time, and then there are people who would hate them enough to poison them and kill them in bulk. And of course, we cannot forget that there are cases where dogs do get angry, they bite people, they bark at people, there are morbid cases reported in the newspaper, and then we have a huge burden of rabies in our country. So, if you look at the life of a dog, then while for pets, We are there from breeding to giving birth to rearing to taking care. In case of a street dog, everything is done by the mother. That is why they are a very interesting system to give us a lot of insights into the ecology and behavior of the species. So I will just give you some findings. I'm not going to tell you how we have gotten to this. 5 years data put together into a few graphs. We looked at maternal care, and we showed that the mothers actually follow a very interesting pattern of adjusting their investment to different types of maternal care behaviors as the pups grow older. And we identified that weaning happens from between the 8th to 13th week. By 14 weeks, the pups are weaned. So that actually tells you when is a good time to adopt a pup if you want to from the street. And this has many associated implications in terms of parental care and evolution of the parental care. Interestingly, we found that there are adults other than the mother who sometimes show care to pups, and in many cases, the red dots here actually show those what we call allo mothers, who are always female related to the mother. So these would be, for the pups, these would be grandmothers, aunts, older sisters, who would actually show some caring behavior towards these pups. Interestingly, there are sometimes one male who would show care, and these males, we call them putative fathers because we could not find an interested enough collaborator who could help us do the genetics. But what we know is that these fathers are very caring, and they are spending a lot of time with the pups, spending as much time in caregiving behaviors as a typical mother. But while mothers are mostly engaged in feeding, the fathers are mostly engaged in playing and protecting the pups. We have documented mortality or survivorship, and we have found that 81% of the pups born in a season die. So all the people who are worried about overpopulation of dogs should remember this. When you see a lot of pups around, only 1/5 of these will survive in a season if we don't intervene. And 65% of this mortality is contributed to by us, so we are the biggest predators of dogs. So they have caring mothers, they have helping aunts, sisters, and grandmothers, they have attentive putative fathers. Still, only 1 in 5 pups survive in a season to adulthood, and that is the proof that in December, January, February, which is the peak of pup births, you have a lot of pups in the population, and then they decline quite steadily over the coming months until the next breeding season during the monsoon. We have looked extensively at scavenging, begging behaviors of dogs, and what we have found is they are indeed the dominant scavengers in community. They follow a simple rule of thumb: if something smells like meat, eat it, and that is what makes them very efficient scavengers. They have very good begging strategies. In fact, right now we are looking at begging strategies and human perceptions and how these are correlated. And we have shown through experiments, a series of experiments actually, that when there is competition, they can set aside their preference for meat and go for the lower preferred food just to avoid aggression between themselves. But if there is too much competition, aggression can be triggered, and that might be one of the reasons when you have a place where a lot of people are actively feeding dogs, you get competition and aggression. We have looked at human-dog interactions. We have shown they are good at following pointing gestures, understanding these gestures without any training. They have, I'll skip this, they understand human gestures, both friendly and unfriendly and threatening. And in the recent times, we have shown that they can distinguish between less and more. That's the upper video. And very interestingly, we have found very recently an MS thesis that the dogs on our streets seem to have a penchant for yellow. And we're still trying to find out why. So what are we doing? We're understanding the behavioral ecology of free-ranging dogs, specifically also from the perspective of urban adaptation and their adaptation to humans. And eventually, we hope we can influence policies which will enable coexistence rather than some drastic measures which are often taken these days. So when I look back, These are the people who made it all happen. A lot of MS students, some PhD students, and then there are always a lot of interns who keep volunteering to work with us. That is all that we have done is because of them. What have we accomplished? If you ask for accomplishments in terms of my research, well, there have been keynote talks, consultations, media reports, interviews, committee memberships, and now I'm here as a YIM mentor. So that I think is a lot to list. But I think the best reward that we got was I was announced to be one of the winners of the Jan Kimmel Award, because I didn't really think, coming from an ecology behavior background, I would get a prestigious DBT award. So that was a real milestone for the lab. I have worked as Associate Dean for International Relations and Outreach. My students have had a lot of achievements, like the first student becoming an inspired faculty. Debutam was the second student, got the Marie Curie Fellowship. Current student Rohan got the Raxas Science Slam Award. And I have been engaging with other partners like the Frontiers Policy Labs, where I am a founding editorial board member, or I was invited to do a BBC podcast. I served as a co-chair of the Global Young Academy. And I think that, again, a big win is we have been selected to host the biggest behavior conference of the world in 2025, which is going to happen in India, in Kolkata next year. What I would like to highlight is, following on the footsteps of my supervisor, I have been able to do science on a shoestring budget, and that is what makes me happy, that we have so much biodiversity, not enough funding for research. We are always looking for more grants, more awards, but the real intensive research that we have been doing has been on a very small budget, but with very interested and very talented students. So we can open our eyes and explore, and there is a lot of science to be done. Yes, I dream big. We constantly keep exploring new questions with the dogs. I want to keep doing a lot more outreach. Whatever outreach I do, I always feel it's not good enough. I want to contribute to dog welfare, and I don't know how much of it we are doing, though we are doing some science advice to some campuses these days. And my big dream is to help build scientific temper in the young generation of our country. One thing that we have achieved as a lab, I showed you this map, where there was only one dot actually, which was our lab working on free-ranging dogs. Now there are all those maps across the world where free-ranging dog research has started over the last 5 or 6 years. I think that is a big step forward for this entire field of research. And I have some such accolades from my past students who remember courses that I have taught and write back to tell me that your course motivated me, and that is the biggest reward a teacher can ever have. What's my pride? Of course, the dog lab. And our theatre group, which my husband and I still run. We are professional thespians. We do professional shows on stage. Other than that, my son, the younger one is not my son, he's my nephew. My daughter, son is 17, daughter is 11, daughter is 12. And IISER, which I call my third baby, because I helped founding it, and IISER has just turned 10 this year, so it's a huge moment of pride for me. Mission Impossible was made possible for me by some people without whom I couldn't have made this journey up to here, starting with my supervisor, Professor Gadatkar, my husband Don, Sumana and Anuradha, my two colleagues who also do behavior at IISER Kolkata and who were my seniors from my PhD days. It's lucky that all three of us are there together, and my kids who have been the most understanding and not demanding kids of the world. Of course, my students and my greater extended family. Yes, we are expected to be super moms, super women, Goddess Durga, whatever you call it, but without them, these people, this wouldn't have been possible. If I have a takeaway message for anyone, it is believe in yourself. No matter what the world thinks of you, I was told you were a woman, why do you want a career in science? That did not make me stop. Don't take no for an answer, and especially the young women out there, you're going to face such situations all your life. Don't accept. Speak up, and it helps to have a good mentor. I'm done. Reach out to others, find your niche, persevere in space. I am the best example of that. I keep saying I'm made in India, I didn't have a stint abroad, and I'm very proud of it. Thank you.
That was a true blue mentor talk. YIM mentor talk. All right, one or two quick questions. We do have some time. Please.
Thank you for the wonderful talk. My question is, you shifted from insect model system to mammalian model system. How do you prove your recruiter, your funding agencies, that?
Yeah, I keep having that question. I kept having that question, but I said I know the basic tools of doing animal behavior. That is all that matters.
So you got some preliminary data before applying for the grant?
When I applied for the first CSIR grant, I had very sketchy data. I actually didn't submit data, but I think my grant proposal was good.
Any more questions? Poonam.
That was a really, really lovely talk. I have a question that you're working on a topic that seems to be dividing the people in a very polarized view. So how do you deal with the opposite end, who is always very much against feeding stray dogs?
I don't actually. So actually it's not just opposite end. The dog haters of course hate me because somehow they think that I am increasing the dog population in the world by working on dogs. And the dog lovers also hate me because they think I'm not doing enough propaganda for them. Because I'm the neutral party. Being a scientist, I cannot take sides. So I deal with them on a one-to-one basis with my data. That's it.
That was a very pertinent question. Yes, many of us would have had it running through our heads. Any other questions? One at the back. Gaurav.
Great, Anindita. So just want to know.
He's asking a question.
And then we'll come to you. Yeah.
Just want to know your experience with INEAS and GYA. Maybe we can talk later, but again, just in.
What do you mean? I mean, what is
how it helped overall in science communication, or maybe your career growth, or.
I think it has. INEAS has taught me to be more diplomatic. I wasn't this diplomatic before I started handling people in INEAS. I was a kind of a reactionist. I have matured in that sense too, and GYA has given me a real, global perspective of things. Very simple things where how to be more inclusive, how to be more tolerant of other people's perspectives. That is one takeaway that GYA has given me.
That was a great question.
Dogs don't cry to begin with. Dogs do have a wail, and that is sometimes they are in pain or they are distressed. But the connotation that humans have of dogs crying is not real.